Welcome to my final video in my series previewing the college football 2021 college football season, previewing the independents today. We're going to go through BYU, Notre Dame, Liberty, UMass, New Mexico State, UConn, I think that, and Army. We're going to go through all of those teams. We're going to look at projected records for each of those teams. We're going to go through the Athlon Sports Magazine and see what they have projected for them. The way this series started, every year over the last 4 or 6 years, I've gone through the Athlon Sports Magazine. Not my favorite magazine for analysis, but my favorite magazine for how they set things up. I like their layout. So I've gone through the magazine by myself. At the end of the year, I've come back and I've checked myself against what Athlon says, and every year I've been better than Athlon, and I figured it was time to get it on the channel. So we're going to be going through, like I said, all of the independent schools today, and then maybe I'm going to give at the end, I'm just going to give kind of a highlight of the top teams in the independents, the ones to really look out for, the ones to really make sure that you're watching their games, because it's going to be an exciting year for these teams. It's probably the video I'm most looking forward to. I have a stake in a couple of these teams, either playing my teams or actually one of them is my team, my second team. I've got 2 teams here, and I'll talk about that when I get there. But I'm excited for this. I'm excited to see what these teams can do. One of the hardest years to analyze, one of the hardest seasons to analyze for college football, period, because of the way the COVID season worked out last year. It really messed things up because it reduced practice schedules, which ended up affecting different teams differently. So that really threw things into a notch there. And then another thing that happened was that schedules got completely wrecked. A lot of conferences went conference only, which makes those teams especially hard to analyze because you don't have any comparisons outside of it. But that conference only move made it hard for a lot of these independent teams who aren't inside conferences, found themselves on outside looking in, had to scramble to make up a schedule of some form. Of course, most of the independents managing it, but UConn just saying, that's it, we'll play next season, we'll pack up shop and see how it works in 2020. So the teams that did manage to get together at least a mostly full schedule, even if it was a week or one, I think are going to show dividends this year, great dividends, because getting those reps in really helped them. But it is, like I said, hard to analyze because like a team, this is going to be one of the first teams we'll analyze, but I'll talk about them real quick. A team like BYU that goes 11-1, but they played a really soft schedule, and you have to ask, okay, how much of it was BYU being a really good team with a first-round quarterback in Zach Wilson, and how much of it was the schedule? How much of it was the opponents they played being impacted themselves by games being canceled, so they're out of whack there, or practices being canceled, or COVID scares, or players out due to injury or COVID? How much of that was impacting what this team was able to go out there and do? Are they as good as that 11-1 record? Are they, or are they worse? Was it a fluke, or is that how the team actually is now? Are they on an upward trend? Are they that good, or was it just because of how COVID was? These are the questions you have to ask, and it makes it very difficult to analyze. So we'll get right in here with BYU. Like I said, 11-1 record last season, 7-6 the year before that. So 2019, 7-6. COVID comes around, 11-1. This was one of the like I've said, this is one of the easiest records in the country, besides maybe Liberty's, I think was a little easier, but one of the easiest in the country, and especially for BYU standards, used to playing a lot of Power 5 schools, didn't play any Power 5 schools last year, and they did have, and they won a lot of games. Now, you have to ask, okay, was that because they were playing a soft schedule or because they were really good? Well, BYU was pretty good last year, managing to beat my Boise State Broncos in big fashion on the blue. Hard place to go in and play. Of course, there were some issues that Boise State was working through, but it was a good win by BYU there. Like I said, one of the hardest places, one of the best winning percentages at home in the last 2 decades. And then they went and beat San Diego State, a pretty good Mountain West team there. And then they went and beat UCF, who's a very good American Athletic Conference team. They beat them big in the Boca Raton Bowl there. So they did suffer a loss, but it wasn't to a down team. It was Coastal Carolina, who had an incredible season last year, only losing to Liberty in the bowl game there. So, and it was a really close matchup too. So I think that BYU was definitely worthy of the 11-1 record. Now, if they'd been playing their regular season, the season that was forecasted with them with a lot of really tough matchups, I don't think that it would have ended up being 11-1, but it was a team that 11-1 record wasn't just a fluke for them. Now, having said that, how are they going to look this year? Only 4 starters back on defense. That is going to be huge. A defensive unit that was very good last season, not allowing a single opponent to go over 25 points. An outstanding defensive unit, but only 4 of those players are back, and they are missing. And so we got a cornerback back, an offensive lineman, a middle linebacker, offensive linebacker, a middle linebacker, and 2 outside linebackers, a middle linebacker, and a cornerback. Sorry, stumbling over my words there. Anyhow, only 4 players back on defense, and then on offense, 7 players back on offense, but they are missing Zach Wilson. Baylor Romney's going to be taking over the reins. They do have Tyler Aguero back, which is outstanding for BYU, and an amazing running back for them, who has just had some huge games against Boise State. Over 1,100 yards rushing and 13 touchdowns last season. A great year for them. I think they're going to lean heavily onto him. But Baylor Romney is a great quarterback, or he's a quarterback who has great potential, I should say. Already owns a win against Boise State his freshman season there. So it's a quarterback who's shown he can go out there and get wins. So I'm excited to see what he can do this season. But those losses on defense, I think, are going to end up hurting BYU in the back end, especially against a very tough schedule that has potential to be having maybe 4 10-win teams on it, or at least 4 9 or more win teams on it. So a very difficult schedule to come in here and play. And Athlon Sports is projecting 7-5 for BYU, and I'll give my overall record at the end, but I'm going to just walk through the schedule here with you guys real quick. So Arizona, neutral site game. I think that's going to be a nice win for BYU. I'm projecting Arizona to have a bad year this year at 1-11. Should be one of the bottom tier teams in the Pac-12. So I'm projecting BYU to open up with a nice win, not just a close win, but I think a big win there, 3 touchdown margin error. Now, you have seen BYU in the past go against teams that I was looking at the schedule and said they should definitely beat that team and they should beat them big, and they end up not doing so, especially that 7-6 season in 2019, which was very disappointing. But I think Kalani Sitake has this team headed in the right direction. They have had some great recruiting classes, and like I said, Baylor Romney is going to be one of those quarterbacks that's going to just explode onto the scene. I thought he played excellently against Boise State when he beat us, and he's a quarterback who I think a lot of people, he's not on their radar at all, and he's going to quickly blip his way up there and be one of the top quarterbacks in the country towards the end of the season. I'm excited to see what he can do here. So I think he'll open up with a win against Arizona, then having to play Utah. That's a really tough game. I believe it's at home for BYU. I actually went in and wrote the AP preseason poll ranking over where the would be, so I can't see it. I believe, though, that it is at home for BYU. Utah being ranked number 24 in the preseason polls. But this is a Utah team. A lot of people are sleeping on them, but I think they're going to be very good in the Pac-12. If you want my full analysis for that, go back and watch the Pac-12 conference preview. But I think they're going to go 11-1 this season. I think they're going to be a lot better than most people are projecting. They have a pretty easy record aside from pretty easy schedule aside from BYU and a few other teams there. But I think that Utah is going to be one of those good teams in the Pac-12. So I do think that's going to be lost by BYU, but I think it's going to be close. It's a rivalry game. It's a game BYU can definitely win. But that early in the season, especially with Baylor Romney getting his feet under him, even though I think towards the end of the season is going to be one of the top quarterbacks in the NCAA. But at the beginning of the season, Sitake is still trying to get his team around him and still trying to develop that rhythm that he wants them to set for the rest of the season. I think they're probably going to drop that loss. Drop that game with a loss. However, the next game against Arizona State, again, again, it's a game that is at BYU, number 25 here, or it should be. I wrote the 25 over where the at would be, but it looks like it is at BYU there. Number 25 in the nation, looks like they're going to be good. I'm projecting a 9-3 record for them, but I do think that BYU is going to be motivated, especially if they drop that game to Utah. I think they come in here hungry, wanting to avenge that against a Pac-12 team, excited to push forward with the rest of the schedule. I think they can get a win against Arizona State. I'm projecting a win there. And then I think they'll pick up a couple nice wins against USF, a 1-11 or projected 1-11 American Athletic Conference team there. And then Utah State, who is not the Jordan Love type level Utah State of years past, still struggling to find their feet. I'm projecting 5-7. That brings us to the interesting matchup, the big one, at least from the rivalry perspective here, Boise State versus BYU. Of course, Boise State owning 7-4 record so far in the series, but BYU's had their number the last couple seasons with a 2-game winning streak. Now, Boise State did have their backup quarterbacks in both of those games. Last season having our technically 4th-string backup because Chase Cord should have been 3rd string, but he was injured. So a couple of things going on with those wins, but the fact is that it doesn't come down to one player, and BYU really tore up the Boise State defense last season. So this is those were good BYU wins, and they have a 2-game winning streak right now. So Boise State hungry, wanting to avenge those losses of past seasons, is a Boise State team that's going to look very different from last year. They're going to look much closer to the 2019 team, but the 2019 team that had Hank Bachmeier with it, not the one that had Chase Cord ending up losing while injured in that BYU game. So this is going to be a very good Boise State team that having to go play on the blue. Sorry, not on the blue. Sorry, it is Boise State at BYU. My bad. So Boise State having to come into BYU, like I said, but they're wanting to avenge that loss on the Blue last season, which was a really devastating loss for Boise State. Really kind of threw their season completely off there. Even though they were able to win out prior to the Mountain West Championship game, it really kind of threw off any hope of them going to the New Year's Six at all. So wanting to avenge the loss there, it's a good Boise State team. They're going to be motivated. I think that this, just with the amount of starters that are back on defense, or sorry, as few starters that are back on defense, I think that BYU defense is going to be very vulnerable against a Boise State team with a new head coach, Andy Avalos, who is going to, with a new offensive coordinator, Tim Plow, air raid style guy with a great running back, George Kalani, number 24. I think that Boise State's offense is going to be very potent. I think it's going to be an offensive type shootout there, but I think that Boise State will own the field at the end of the day, just returning. I think Andy Avalos, a defensive-minded guy, I think he's going to reinstate a much better defense at Boise State and allow them to come out the victor in this one, just with the I think with all the new faces on defense here for BYU. All right, so moving on from that, I think they'll get a nice win against Baylor, 5-7 team in my projections. Washington State, a 4-8 team. Then they play the game with Virginia coming to BYU. The return of their old head coach there, Bronco Mendenhall, coming back to BYU. Of course, leaving that team to go coach at Virginia. That is, it's almost a rivalry game in that sense. You know, he said, I've got better pastures to go to. I'm gonna go coach at BYU, which of course allowed Kalani Sitake to take over the reins of the Cougar program. So I think that that's going to be a rivalry game. I think it's going to be interesting to watch. I do think that Bronco Mendenhall is a better coach than Kalani Sitake there. In addition to that, I think Virginia is going to be having a pretty good year this year after having a pretty disappointing season last year, going 5-5. I am projecting them to go 9-3 this season. A lot of starters back on defense and offense, including their starting quarterback and running back. I think that Virginia is able to come. They play pretty well on the road in the West, of course, coming to Boise State a few seasons back and beating them big at home when Boise State had gone the previous year in 2015 and beaten Virginia at home. So this is a Virginia team that travels pretty well as far as how they play, and it's a Virginia team that is going to be coming in motivated to win under Bronco Mendenhall, who's a good head coach there. And like I said, I think he's a better head coach than Kalani Sitake. It might be a matter of degrees, but I think that's going to pay huge, and I think that they're going to get the win there. Like I said, a Virginia team that I'm projecting to be going 9-3 overall. And then I think they'll get the win against Idaho State, Georgia Southern, and then the final game of the year, it's a tough matchup against the number 15 team right now in this nation, and USC. Team I'm projecting to go 10-2. A really tough way to end the season because I just don't know if BYU has it in them to win this game. I think that is possible. I think that BYU has a possibility to win a lot of these games. I think they can win at Utah. I think they can win. Sorry, not at Utah, but Utah coming to BYU. I think they can win against Utah. I think they can definitely win against Boise State. That was going to be one of the closest games on the schedule for both teams. I think they definitely can win against Virginia. I really do, but I just the way I'm looking at it with the projections and looking at what Virginia's bringing back versus BYU, I think Virginia's going to own the day just slightly. And USC is really the only team that I really am not sure that BYU has it in them to pull off the win. But if they're coming into this team with wins against all those other teams and they're undefeated, this is a team that could potentially pull off the win here, having to go play at USC. So my overall projection right now, Athlon projecting 7-5. I'm projecting 8-4. A little bit of a rebuilding year, big rebuilding year on defense. I don't think the offense is going to lose too much of a step, but I think there is going to be a little bit of a difference there between Zach Wilson and Baylor Romney, of course, because Zach Wilson was just such an incredible high-caliber quarterback with over 3,600 yards passing and 33 touchdowns. I mean, just an amazing high-caliber quarterback who had a decent preseason outing against the Jets, or sorry, not against the Jets, but for the Jets. So I think there will be a little bit of a drop-off as Kalani Sitake tries to rebuild this team and move them forward. But I think Baylor Romney, especially coming into his junior year next year, is going to be a very high-caliber quarterback who can bring BYU back to their high-proficiency winning games like they're used to. So, like I said, 8-4 is my projection for BYU this season. But I do think that it's so 8-4 is my projection. But I also think that is a BYU team that could just as easily go 11-1. I mean, I think they're going to be that close, just a matter of a few points here and there. And if Sitake can build the defense up to the level that it was last season, they're going to be a very, very dangerous team. Like I said, difficult season to analyze. I fully project a few of these teams to have to surprise me. Teams I'm projecting to go lower end or even a middling team like 8-4. I project some of these teams to come out and just completely blow me away. And then some of the teams that I'm going out on a limb for that I'm saying are going to be really good, I could totally see those teams also having bad years as well. I'm hoping to be pretty consistent overall, but just with the way COVID was last year and the difficulties analyzing this season, I don't know if I'll be quite as on the line as I usually am. But the goal is just to beat Athlon. So if I can be better than they are, that's the main point. All right, that brings us to Notre Dame Fighting Irish, number 9 in the nation, projected record 10-2 by Athlon Sports, 10-2 last season and 11-2 the year before that. This is This is a Notre Dame team that has had a high level of success under Brian Kelly for the 11 years he's coached there so far, with a 102-39 record so far for Notre Dame. It is a very difficult schedule. They only return 2 stars back on offense. So I said BYU returns 4 stars back on defense, one of the fewest in the nation. Well, this is the fewest starters back of any team I've looked at so far. This is the fewest starters back in the nation of any team. I don't know how they lost so many people, but they have 2 players back, 2 stars back on offense, and only 6 stars back on defense. So it's going to be a completely different team. The good news for Notre Dame is that this is a team that has recruited very well under Brian Kelly and has managed to put in the pieces and win games, at least during the regular season. They struggle in the postseason, but it's been a team that's been able to win games during the regular season regardless of who's in there, regardless of who's at quarterback. And the second, and like high-level teams, the second-string players for these teams could be starters and would definitely be starters at any other school. So when you get to a high-level team like a Notre Dame or Alabama or Ohio State or Clemson or something like, or an Oklahoma even, something like that, you find those teams don't really have drop-off year after year. So I am not foreseeing this to be too much of a difficulty with all of these losses across the board. It'd be interesting to see who ends up being the starting quarterback here. Athlon Sports projecting Jack Cohen here, the senior, motivated to come out big in his senior season, so that could be a good call. So like I said, Athlon Sports is projecting 10-2. Let's look at their record here, their season here. I think they'll open up with a nice win against a bad Florida State team who I'm projecting going 4-8. Should get a win against Toledo, but it's not a Toledo team you can sleep on. I'm thinking that Toledo's going to be good this year. I'm projecting 11-1 for Toledo. I think they can get I think Notre Dame is the better team. They can definitely get the win, but if they're sleeping, they might get upset. So they got to be careful there. Win against Purdue, 2-10. Now the schedule gets really tough. I mean, this is a really tough Notre Dame schedule, one of the tougher I've seen in a while here. Of course, Notre Dame going off on their own this year after playing with the ACC last season, so back out as independents. Number 12 in the nation so far right now, Wisconsin, a team I project going 9-3. I think they can get the win there versus Wisconsin there, but it is it's a neutral site game in Chicago. But it is, all of these games, I think Notre Dame's going to have a nice season. I'll give my projected record at the end here. I do think Notre Dame, though, is going to have a nice season, but they're going to win a lot of close games. It's not going to be blowouts, I don't think, in most of these matchups, and it's going to be really close across the board. So I think they can grab a win here against Wisconsin, a 9-3 team. Cincinnati, a top 10 team right now, according to the AP poll. Now, I don't think they deserve to be that high, but a top 10 team, according to the AP, 10-2. I think Notre Dame definitely the better team in that. I think Cincinnati, a good team out of the American Athletic Conference, but I think pretty highly overranked right now. I would probably put them about 16th in the nation at most. But I think Notre Dame can get the win there. Virginia Tech, a team that's going to be kind of having a down year. I think they're going to go 7-5, grab a win. USC, number 15 in the nation right now, a 10-2 team. I think they can grab the win against them as well. And really, these are teams that I'm not saying they're going to get the win because they're having down years. These are teams that are going to be really good. But just Notre Dame has had that consistent high-level success regardless of who is in any of these slots. It is going to be one of the most difficult rebuilding year. And it is a Notre Dame team that I could just as easily see going 8-4. So Notre Dame fans, there's a lot of promise, a lot of hope for this season, but also don't be super surprised if things start going downhill because it is a major rebuilding year for Brian Kelly. But like I said, I have a huge amount of respect for Brian Kelly, what he's able to do. The recruiting classes at Notre Dame have been fantastic, so I don't foresee any difficulties. But like I said, it's going to be close. So USC 10-2. Now here we come to the first big and really the main hiccup for Notre Dame. They played North Carolina, Number 10 team in the nation right now, one of the best teams, at least in the ACC, returned an incredible quarterback who I think is going to be the best quarterback in the ACC. I've completely blanked on his name here. I do apologize for that. 1 second, let me just look back here quick. Sam Howell, sorry. I don't know why I couldn't remember that. Anyhow, Sam Howell, I think, going to be one of the top quarterbacks in the ACC there. A team that I think can compete for and potentially take upset. I am predicting an upset against Clemson in the ACC championship game. So this is a very good North Carolina team that I project going 11-1. I think that they will beat North Carolina. I do believe that North Carolina will beat Notre Dame in this matchup, especially considering the fact that, like I said, so many players have to be replaced on offense, and this is just a really top-tier North Carolina team with Mac Brown. Yes, Mac Brown finally being able to, man, it's late at night. I'm kind of losing it here. Mac Brown finally being able to put his team in the position, in the driver's seat where he's shown the caliber of coach that he is, of course, all those great years at Texas, finally being able to put this team where he wants them and has finally achieved that level of success that I think will show dividends this year. But like I said, I think that's going to be a loss against North Carolina. I just want to mention here, make sure that you like and subscribe. It's not just Boise State stuff. I do college football stuff in general, and I'm going to be having some videos. I might have mentioned this at the beginning, but I can't remember, and I'm going to say it anyway, because chances are a lot of you guys probably skipped over that anyway to get to the Notre Dame. So make sure you like and subscribe, because I'm going to be having a video coming out where I talk about the race for the playoffs and the race for the New Year's Six, discussing that group of 5 slots and just the which teams I think are going to be potentially competing and in that New Year's Six out of the group of 5. So make sure you like my videos and subscribe, because there's a lot of great college football content coming your way. So sorry for that halftime break there. Moving forward, 3-9 Navy. So Navy, I'm projecting going 3-9, should be an easy win there. Win against Virginia, a good Virginia team, not like Virginia Tech. I think they're going to be good this year. I think they can go 9-3, but that is going to, I think, a win that Notre Dame can pull off. And then Georgia Tech shouldn't be too hard. 3-9 Stanford shouldn't be too hard. 5-7. So the games that Notre Dame really has to look out for here are Wisconsin, Cincinnati, USC, North Carolina, and Virginia. These are going to be games that Notre Dame is going to win by just a few points, I think, for most of them. This is a team that could just as easily go 8-4 and 7-5 if they are not careful. But I am projecting an 11-1 record overall by the number 9, as of now, Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I'm excited to see what happens this season. It's going to be really, really interesting to watch, to see how Brian Kelly rebuilds his team. But I have a lot of faith in him, and I think he's going to do great. Okay, that brings us to Army, the Black Knights. Last season, 9-3, a great record. They were playing a pretty weak schedule, but they had a great record. Were able to beat Navy and Air Force to take the Commanders-in-Chief trophy, even though both of those games they only won by less than 15 points of spread. But it was a really good Army team last year after going 5-8 in 2019, so a disappointing season for them then. But they returned 5 stars on offense and 8 stars back on defense. And I think that it's going to be another good Army team. Athlon Sports is projecting 7-5, but I think they're going to be better than that. They're going to be aided by the fact that they play a very weak schedule. So the overall record that I'm projecting for them, I'm not sure the Army is necessarily worthy of that overall record that I'm going to be projecting, but based on the weak schedule here, I think they're going to be able to pull off the wins necessary to get that record. So opening up with a nice streak here, wins against Georgia State, a team I'm projecting going 3-9, Western Kentucky, a team I'm projecting going 6-6, Connecticut, 2-10, Miami, Ohio, 5-7. The first big challenge for Army is going to be Ball State, a team that played very well last year in the MAC, and then outside the MAC beating San Jose State, a team that I'm projecting going 9-3, but I think Army is the better team here, a team that can get it done. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there, but that's going to be, they're having to go play at Ball State as well, which could add another move into the mix. But I think that Army's steady grind, grind out the clock offense is going to be too much for the Ball State defense. I don't see the Ball State defense being too much of a hurdle here. So I do think the Army will pull off the win there, but they can't be sleeping on them because it's going to be close. All right, then they play number 12 Wisconsin. This is going to be that first loss for Army. 9-3 Wisconsin, just another caliber level team. The Army really just isn't at right now. Really hasn't been at that level in the past, 4 or 5 years anyway. So I think that Army is going to lose that game to Wisconsin. I think they can, however, go and beat ACC team Wake Forest, who looks vulnerable this year, projecting a 7-5 record for them. I think they can get a win there against that Power 5 team. Now, Air Force is going to be a tough one. I think that it's going to be a loss against Air Force. A good Air Force team this year, projecting 9-3. Last year's Air Air Force team was basically a skeleton roster. It sent a ton of players home due to the season projected being canceled, or it was canceled, and then it was brought back, and Air Force decided to leave a lot of those players at home, give them that rare military academy extra year or extra semester, I think it is. Anyhow, a weird situation for Air Force. They were kind of playing on a skeleton roster. Of course, they lost their amazing quarterback due to off-field issues that he'd been suspended, so they were working their way through. I think they're going to have a good quarterback stepping in this year who showed some promise last season. So and even last season with all those ups and downs, they still only lost 10-7. So I think Air Force does own the day this year, but it is a rivalry game, so anything can happen. So that is going to be a projected loss here, 9-3. 9-3 record for Air Force overall and projected loss. I do think I read somewhere that College Game Day is going to Air Force, the Air Force Army game. I believe I read that. So that's going to be exciting. It's going to be a close game. It always is. I was lucky enough to go in 2019 to the Air Force Army game, the Army game at Air Force. So it will be exciting to see what happens here, but I do think it will be a loss. All right, we should pull off an easy win against FCS School Bucknell. UMass, who's going to be a pretty terrible independent team, predicting 4-8. And then Liberty. Now, Liberty is going to be an incredible team this year. Malik Willis is going to be an amazing quarterback. He's projected as a potential Heisman dark horse. Hugh Freeze, one of the top coaches in the country. I just think that they're operating on another level, and they'll definitely own the win against Army. Even though last time that they played, I think it was in 2019, Army ended up winning the game. But again, there was a lot of weird stuff going on there. Hugh Freeze was dealing with an injury, wasn't super in with and focused with the team. So I think it's going to be a different Liberty team that owns the field at the end of this game. And then I do think though that Army can end the season with a win against their rival Navy. To not quite, I don't think they'll retain the Commanders-in-Chief trophy this year. I think that Air Force will win against Navy and Army. But I think that Army can end the season in a nice fashion with a 9-3 overall record against a Navy team that I'm projecting going 3-9, still trying to find themselves after losing Malcolm Perry. So I'm excited to see this Army team, see what they can put up on the field. I think they have a couple of tough games that they're going to end up dropping here, but it's going to be exciting to see what they can do. All right, Connecticut Huskies. All right, and we're just going to skim through this real quick because our pretty terrible team that went 2-10 last season and 2-10 the year before that, versus going through the entire record. I'm just going to point out where I think some wins could potentially come for this team. They return 7 players on offense and 8 players on defense, but overall, it's not, it doesn't really matter who they're returning because the guys returning haven't been winning it. So it is here in their head coach, Randy Edsall. He's coming into his 15th year at UConn, 80-100. I just don't know how long they're going to keep him around, how many years of mediocrity to below mediocrity is enough before Connecticut says, that's it, we need a coach in here who can actually win some games. So I just, 2-10 record is what I'm projecting again. Athlon Sports think they'll do a little bit better than that. They're projecting 3-9, but I think they'll go in again for their, at least, I'm not sure where they did in 2018, but at least their 3rd season in a row with a 2-10 record. I think they can grab a win here against FCS School Holy Cross. I think that they might be able to grab a win against Vanderbilt, who's a lower tier SEC team, but I think Vanderbilt will hold the field there at the end of the day. The UMass might be vulnerable, but I think that's going to be a loss. I think they can win against FCS School Yale, Ivy League school there in Yale, but everyone else on the schedule is going to be a loss. They do play a couple of good teams here. They play UCF, they play Clemson, they play Army, of course, like I've already mentioned. They play Fresno State. So it's not an easy schedule by any stretch of the imagination, and it's Connecticut. So I think 2-10 is pretty fair for the Huskies there. All right. That brings us to New Mexico State Aggies. So a 2-10 record last year and 2-10 the year before that. So kind of in the same boat as UConn. We won't spend too much time here. Only 2 starters back on offense. So just like I said, Notre Dame only returning 2 starters, and they were, they had the least there. Well, at least now they're tied with New Mexico State. They're not alone. 2 starters back on offense, but unlike Notre Dame, who can achieve a high level of success, I think it's going to be a completely different story here with Doug Martin. No relation to the Boise State Doug Martin, but Doug Martin coming into his 9th year, at New Mexico State. It's going to be, I think, another bad year for New Mexico State overall. They're, like I said, 2-10 and 2-10 last year. Athlon Sports is projecting 1-11. I think that's fair. I think they can grab a win here against South Carolina State, but there is a lot of losses on this schedule, it looks like. UTEP might be vulnerable. That might be a game that they can go in there and get a win. They might be able to go in and get a win at UMass, but everything else looks like a loss to me. They do play Alabama. That's a definite loss. And then the funny thing here is that New Mexico State plays 7 out of their 12 games against Mountain West teams. I mean, you might as well call them an official member of the Mountain West at this point. I thought that was kind of funny, chuckling watching that. Look, when I was reviewing the schedule before the video, they play Hawaii twice, and I think both of those are going to be big losses. They've done that a couple of times. I think it was against Liberty that they ended up playing twice in the past season, or that might have been against UMass. I might be getting those mixed up in my head, but I believe it was against Liberty that they ended up playing twice in one season. But projected 1-11 by Athlon, and I think that's fair, 1-11 overall. All right, UMass Minutemen, 0-4 record last year, 1-11 the year before that. So again, we've kind of reached the bottom of the barrel here in the independent schools, at least for right now. 0-4 last year, 1-11 the year before that. They do return 5 players back on offense and 8 players back on defense. Athlon Sports is projecting a little bit of an uphill tick here for the Minutemen with a 3-9 record, and I'm going to go one better. I think Minutemen can go 4-8 for one of their best seasons in the last few years. I think they can grab a win here against Connecticut, who looks again to be terrible. I think they can grab a win against Rhode Island, FCS school. They can grab a win against Maine, so that's at least 3 right there. And I think they can go out and grab a win against New Mexico State, who really looks to be bad. And again, those only 2 players back is going to hurt them there. You know, they return. New Mexico State returns a wide receiver and a left tackle, and that's it. So at least with Minutemen, they're returning 4 players back across the board. They have to play a pretty tough schedule here with games against Pittsburgh, Boston College, Coastal Carolina, Toledo, Florida State, and Liberty, as well as and Army. So it's a tough schedule anyway, and it's UMass that we're dealing with. So projected 3-9 by Athlon, and 4-8 is what I'm going to project here for them. All right, that brings us to the final team of the game that we're going to be reviewing today. But before we do that, I have something I need to do real quick. I need to make a little bit of a costume change. And we're back. All right. Let's go Flames. Yes, this is a football signed by every single member of the 2019 Flames roster. And we are ready to review the Liberty Flames. Most of you might not know, I'm actually also a Liberty Flames fan. It is my alma mater. I wasn't able to go to Boise State because they didn't have any Air Force ROTC, so I had to go to Liberty, but it turned out to be a great decision, a great school if you ever want to look into it. A lot of online programs. So, excited for the Liberty Flames this year. Hugh Freeze has done a great job, just an incredible job of turning this team around after the Gill years. Great years under Gill in the FCS level, but just not an FBS level coach, I don't think. Was really when I was standing in the stands for those games under Coach Gill, and really the whole even the whole student section was doing the same thing. You could predict what Gill was going to run. Everybody knew what play was going to go. It was run up the middle, deep pass or throw over the middle. That's what it was every single play. And Hugh Freeze has totally changed the offense and the defense. In addition to bringing in great players across the board like Malik Willis, he's also done a great job of mixing in exciting playing styles for Liberty. They look a lot more like my other team, Boise State now. They put tight ends in the game. Of course, Boise State, a big team when it comes to using tight ends. I've said this before that the offensive styles for Boise State and Liberty look very similar. It's exciting to watch. They'll mix in trick plays. They have a very balanced format where they mix in the run and the pass at an equal level. And Malik Willis, of course, able to use his feet. But the tight end shifts are wonderful, and they use the tight ends in the passing game, which is awesome to watch. Really adds another component to the game. So 10-1 record last season, 8-5 the year before that. Everyone is sleeping on the Liberty Flames. Not in the top 25 polls. I could not understand it. I am absolutely infuriated by the fact that Coastal Carolina ended up in the top 25 polls and Liberty didn't. Just absolutely mind-boggling decision. Continues to show the bias shown towards Liberty by the AP voters and even by the college football playoff voters that we saw last season. A ton of bias across the media against Liberty. The fact that Coastal Carolina, who Liberty beat in the bowl game, even though they beat them in overtime, and they wouldn't have had to beat them in overtime if they hadn't fumbled the ball at the goal line and ended up causing the game to go into overtime. So we even almost beat them by better than we did in the bowl game. But after Liberty beat them in the bowl game, to then put Coastal Carolina back ahead of Liberty in the rankings, and this is a Liberty team that returns 20 starters overall, 10 back on offense, 10 back on defense, almost exactly the same number of starters back for Coastal Carolina, except that Liberty returns their #1 rusher and Coastal Carolina doesn't. So when you look at these two teams, Coastal Carolina, I know I'm going off on a tangent, but I had to say, I had to do it. When you look at these two teams, Coastal Carolina and Liberty, when you look at these two teams, they're almost the same teams that they were from last year, except Coastal Carolina's missing their running back. So they're almost the same teams, which means that Liberty beat that same team in the bowl game, and then that same team, Coastal Carolina, is absent in running back while Liberty returns their running back. So I'm not saying Coastal Carolina should be ranked. They definitely should, but Liberty should be in there ahead of them. Coastal Carolina coming in at number 22. Liberty should be sitting at number 21 at least. This is going to be outstanding Flames roster. I'm so excited. Of course, Liberty has brought in a number of fantastic transfers. TJ Green coming in, and they've brought in a couple of other a great backup for Malik Willis has been brought in as well as I believe they brought in a great offensive tackle, and they might have even brought in some players in the defense. ASOR, the sports site that I write for Liberty, has been posting almost daily, it seems, the amount of either new signees that Liberty's brought into future classes or transfers that Liberty's been able to bring in. So this is a stacked team, a defense that struggled initially there but played great down the stretch, and of course was a big key in winning that game in overtime against Coastal. So this is a outstanding team across the board with highlight players everywhere on the offense and the defense. Going to be a great backfield again. I think it's going to be another kind of three horsemen backfield back there with running backs with Joshua back there and TJ Green, of course, leading the way. I think it's going to be an outstanding job. So let's just jump right into it. Athlon Sports is projecting 9-3, so they're sleeping on the Flames as well, but I think that's going to be much better than that. So I think we're going to grab a win here against Campbell, who I think is going to be, FCS school shouldn't be too hard. 0-4 last season playing an FBS schedule. But Campbell, a FCS school, should be a nice big win there at home for the Flames. Then they go to Troy. I'm going to hope and try to go to that game, so if you're going to that game, make sure you look me up. I think they're going to play against Troy, a team from the Sun Belt who I think is going to be having a bit of an upward year, a much better year than they have in the past. 8-4, so Liberty can't be sleeping, but they're playing on a different level, much better than that Troy team. Shouldn't be too hard to win that game. Then we play at home against Old Dominion, a team I'm projecting going 3-9. Then they play at Syracuse, of course, a team that they beat last year in great style, with Shedder Lewis just had a breakout game, an incredible game for them. Of course, he's going to be that third back in the backfield, kind of completing the 1-2-3 punch that Liberty does with their running backs. But he had a great year. He had a great year, but he had a great game against Syracuse, a team that I'm projecting to still be bad this year with a 3-9 record. I think Liberty can definitely go in there and get the win, and Liberty's better this season than they were last year, so they should be able to go get that win. Then they go play at UAB. Now, this is going to be one of the tougher teams on Liberty's schedule here. A team that's going to be very good there from Conference USA, a potential top 25 team coming in. No, maybe not at the beginning of the season, but towards the end of it. I'm projecting a 9-3 record for UAB. It's a team that played very well last year and the year before that. So I think that that's going to be a close one. Liberty can't be sleeping. It's going to be a pretty hard-fought matchup, but I think Liberty can win the game there. I was going to go to that game too, but I've got a wedding I have to go to instead. So it's all right. We're going to move on now. Middle Tennessee, 6-6 projected record. Not a very good team there from, I believe, the MAC. Should be an easy win. Then they play ULM, bottom tier group of 5 team, 1-11. That should be a win. North Texas, a team that's been able to beat Liberty in the past, but I think that they'll be going 6-6 this season, not be as good as they were in the past. And Liberty, of course, a much better team than they were in the past. Should be able to pull off the win there. All right, UMASS, this is a team that went 4-8. It's not a team that went 4-8, sorry, a team that I'm projecting going 4-8. Again, one of those bottom tier FCS teams, a team that went 0-4 last season. Shouldn't be too hard. Should be a pretty big blowout for Liberty. Now we come into the final stretch. So that kind of middle stretch there, at least after Troy and Old Dominion, after Troy and UAB. So that Middle Tennessee, ULM, North Texas, UMass should be pretty easy. A lot of big blowout wins for Liberty. Chances to potentially get into the rankings. We'll see if the voters allow us in. Really kind of have a referendum on locking Liberty out of the rankings, it seems. But I think Liberty will definitely have earned their way there. They will definitely deserve to be in it. I'm not sure if they will be, though. So they're going to go play at Ole Miss, Hugh Freeze's former school, where he had such a great he did such a great job with them, of course, being able to beat Alabama twice while he was coaching for them. A lot of people forget that. Hugh Freeze is one of the best coaches in the nation. Not just Group of Five, but Power Five. An incredible coach. Liberty owes entirely their success in the modern FBS level to Hugh Freeze. Anyhow, going and playing at Ole Miss, a game that a lot of people are projecting to lose. They do have one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC there with, I think his name's Corey Futrell. A very, very good quarterback, but I think overall this Ole Miss team is going to lose a step. I'm projecting a 7-5 record for Ole Miss. I think that this is a game, the players for Ole Miss are going to be bigger, better, and faster than most of the Liberty players, but that hasn't stopped Liberty in the past, of course, being able to go beat Virginia Tech and Syracuse and almost beating NC State in that game at NC State. So this is a game that a lot of people are projecting Liberty losing. I think that Liberty can go in there and grab a win. It's going to be Hugh Freeze is going to be hugely motivated. The Liberty team is going to be hugely motivated. I think that Hugh Freeze is the better coach in this matchup. I think that he can go in there. I mean, if a coach can beat Alabama, they can beat anybody realistically. And I think that he's going to have this team prepared. They're not going to be overlooking them. This is the game that's highlighted, circled, read it out, you know, got a couple of darts thrown at it. This is the game on the schedule for the Liberty Flames, so they are going to be ready to go. Ole Miss is going to be ready for Liberty. I think they're going to be ready for this matchup, especially if Liberty's a top 25 team, but I think Liberty can go get the Ole Miss win. I'm also going to that game. I know I'm going to see a lot of you there, Flames Nation. I know I'm excited for that. I know a lot of you have been saying on the Flames Nation page on Facebook that you're going to be going, so I'm pumped. I'm excited to see it. So I think Liberty can go grab the win. Now, that next week against November 20, so actually I think it's 2 weeks from then. Anyhow, number 23 in the nation right now, Louisiana from the Sun Belt. This is the toughest team that Liberty plays on their schedule. I think this is a better team than Ole Miss, at least with talent or ability, or at least a ceiling level what they're going to be able to achieve. A team that I think is going to be going 11-1. I think they'll be ranked pretty highly when Liberty plays them. I do think that Liberty is the better team here. Sorry. Sorry there. I do think that Liberty is the better team here, but I think Louisiana is going to be highly ranked. They're going to be going on a massive win streak after losing to Texas at the beginning of the season. And I think that they're going to be really, really motivated to win this game, not just playing against Liberty, but they're going to be motivated to win this game because they might have the chance to be playing for something much bigger than this Liberty game. They might be in the driver's seat for the New Year's Six at this point, or at least in the competition, in the discussion for it. Liberty's going to be coming off of a big win against Ole Miss. They're going to be they're going to be beat up after that game against Ole Miss, playing the much bigger players there. They're going to be elated after it, and they might be celebrating just a little too much and end up dropping this game to Louisiana. It's a game that Liberty can definitely win, but I am going to project a loss. Now, having said that, if Liberty loses to Ole Miss, I think they're going to come in hungry. They will have been beat up still, but I think they're going to come in hungry. They're going to come in angry, and I think they're going to come in and beat Louisiana. So Liberty, I think, is going to drop one game on their schedule here, either to Ole Miss or Louisiana. If they beat Ole Miss, they'll lose to Louisiana in my projection. If they lose to Ole Miss, I think they'll beat Louisiana. And then they're going to finish out the season here against Army, a pretty good Army team, 9-3, not deserving necessarily of that 9-3 record, but they do play a pretty easy record, as I've discussed earlier in this video. So I think they can pull off the win here against Army. Of course, Army owning the game against Liberty in, I think it was 2019. So a game that they can't be sleeping on, but I think the Flames will finish the season here with a nice win against Army to finish the year 11-1 for another incredible season for the Liberty Flames. Malik Willis, junior year, big chance to end up leaving after this and going to the draft. I would love to see him stick around, but when you have a quarterback of his caliber, it doesn't happen very often. But very, very, very exciting year for the Liberty Flames. Again, Athlon projecting 9-3. I'm saying 11-1, and Liberty could be playing for something potentially very big. Again, they're not number one for any bowl bids right now, so they have to kind of wait for teams to opt out or to not be eligible to get those bowls. But if Liberty's able to have, especially if Liberty's able to pull off winning against Louisiana and go 12-0, but especially if they're even at 11-1, they might be eligible for a bigger bowl game. I think they're going to be a game that people are going to want to see, that ESPN, even with all their bias towards Liberty, might want to put up there for a big matchup. So I'm excited to see what happens with the Flames at the end of the season, but really right now, concentrating on that regular season, I think it's going to be a very, very good year for the Liberty Flames. All right, So that's my video. It's a longer one, and I went a little bit more in depth than I usually would on these teams. But again, I have a stake in a lot of them. BYU, a Boise State rival. Notre Dame, just a team you can't talk about in short words. And then Army, as an Air Force fan. You gotta be. So Air Force is my third team. As an Air Force fan, you gotta appreciate the other military schools there. And of course, Liberty, my number 2 team. I definitely can't sleep on the Flames, and they're going to be outstanding this year. I think they're going to be better, at least record-wise, and even necessarily talent coming back. I mean, they have Hugh Freeze. I think they might even be better than my Boise State Broncos, who I'm projecting a 10-2 record overall. But I think both my teams are going to have incredible years this year, Boise State and Liberty. I'm excited to see what happens. So if you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe. I don't just do Boise State stuff. I do general college football stuff in general, and then if you're a Liberty Flames fan watching this video, make sure you go on and make sure you go on and join the Flames Nation group. It's the largest Flames fan group in the nation with over 2,500 members. I only started last year. We've already exploded up to 2,500 It's 2,500 members. It's going to be a very, very exciting season. And if you're a Boise State fan watching this video, make sure you join Bronco Nation Updates. Over 8,000 members on that page. All right, thank you so much for watching this video. And as always, go Big Blue and go Flames!